Guys, until now we have just created the database and the entity framework, which is given in this EF folder. Okay, now let us go and create the web API. For that, we'll have to go to this controllers folder, right click, say add controller. Now you can choose any one of these templates, but my favorite template is this one, web API to controller with actions using entity framework. It will ask you for three things. First of all, the controller name it will figure out on its own. First thing that it will ask you is which data context do you want to use. So data context is this context which is given in this eis.context.cs file, and as you know, our context name is eis container. Okay, and then it will ask you for the model class. Now what is a model class? As I told you, these two are called as database models. Okay, and by model class, what it means to ask you is for which table will you use this particular controller. So if I use model class as employee, then this controller will be used for all the CRUD operations to be performed on employee table. And here if I choose department, then this controller will be used for doing all the CRUD operations on department table. Okay, so as I told you, this controller name, you won't have to give it. AI will figure it out. So let me first create one controller for employee, and the controller got created. In this controller, if you notice, it has get employee method, then get employee having a parameter ID, put employee method, then post employee method, delete employee method, and then these two methods are also there. Now this method is being used in the put method, so it's a private method. It is being used over here inside put. Okay, and this method is used when this controller gets disposed. At that time this one gets called. Okay, so it is just disposing the context. What is DB? DB is, by the way, the context of your database. Okay, now understand this thing that every method gets called for a special URI. Okay, like in the URL, if you give localhost slash API slash employees, then this particular method will get called. Okay, then after employees, if you give some ID, then this method will get called. Okay, then if you give the same URI but you will be using the HTTP verb as put, then this method will get called. Okay, if you use the HTTP method as post and if you give the call to employees, then this method will get called, and so on. If you want to know details about it, go to ASMX. Here in application start, you have web API config.register. If you go to that method, you will find this routing pattern given over here. So whenever you say after API something, that something is considered to be the controller, and ID is an optional route parameter. Okay, so let us see that in working. Let's just build this project and run it. And your application is up and running. Don't worry, this forbidden error will always come for everybody. Why? Because the URL should be, as we discussed, API slash employees. Okay, so I'll just copy this. I will go here. I will give a slash over here and paste it. Okay, enter. Now it should give you some response, but notice that it is still failing, and the message that is given is that object content 1 type failed to serialize the response body for the content type application or XML. Okay, so whenever you get this kind of an error, what it basically means is that you are trying to return the DB context dot your DB set. Okay, so the return type is a DB set, and this DB set can never be passed properly into an XML output. Okay, and that is why it is always recommended that you do not return this DB set. You rather create your own object of employee and then you return that. Okay, so it will work fine after that. Now how will you get around that? I'll tell you how. Here you will be seeing a model folder. Let me minimize everything. Here is the model folder. Let me rename it to DTO because you are anyways calling this employee and department also as model. You call them as database model. So let us call this something different. Let us call it as DTO. And I cannot rename it unless I stop this debugging. Yes. Now, if I rename it to DTO, then it means data transfer object. Okay. I'll right click and I'll add a class to it. And let me call this class as employee. Let this class have properties ID, name, and city. So these are the columns that are there in the employee table. Okay, so I'm just creating my own data transfer object. Okay, so it will be in the namespace service.dto because service is the name of my project and DTO is the folder inside it. So by default, the namespace will be taken as service.dto. Now I go back to this employee controller, and here instead of returning the DB set, what I'll do is I'll say from this DB set, select new employee. Now, which employee is this? Mm, well, the name is again the same. So this is employee DTO. So I'll be saying service.dto.employee. Okay. And here inside this, I will be writing what are the parameters. Now it is ID. ID should be equal to. Now here, employees is a DB set of employee. Okay. So I'll do one thing from employee in employees. Okay, and here I'll be saying that for each of these employees you will be writing employee.id, and here I'll be saying name should be equal to employee.name, then city should be equal to employee.city. Okay, and whatever I get out of this complete link query, that entire thing to be to listed, means I'll be converting it to a list, and then I'll be returning that list over here. Now don't worry, list by default can be given over here like list of employee. And here employee is not this employee, employee is what? Service DTO employee. Okay, so you're returning a list of your DTO objects. Now let us run this project. And it is even better not to return this employees directly. You should be returning it into OK. So OK means your service call was absolutely OK. The status will be 200 while returning it. And if you have to do that, then you will be giving the return type as HTTP action result. Now it is fine. Let us run it. And you're getting all those employees. Now I will also modify it a bit just to let you know that what all is possible. Okay. Now here, what if I would not have used this OK? Then would it work? I will give it as employees. Now it will say that the types don't match. So I will give the type as list of service DTO employee. Okay. Now the types match. It will compile. Let us build that and see how it runs. Now even this thing runs. But as I told you, it is always better to return something like HTTP result, and here it should be encompassed into something called as OK. So notice here what OK does. OK basically creates a HTTP result with the specified value. What is the specified value? Employees is the specified value. Okay. So the advantage is that the status code and everything is properly given in OK. And if you want to say that there is no result found, then you can just return not found. And if you have to say that it's a bad request, then you can always send bad request. Okay, so this is the use of OK over here. Until now, you could very easily call these calls because these were get calls. So the HTTP verb being used over here was get. Okay, but now is the right time to acquaint you with Fiddler. So in Fiddler, what you do is you just copy this particular URL and you go to this composer and you paste that URL over here. And the HTTP verb can be given as get. Okay, and get does not require a body, so you delete the body. And now you execute it. So notice that this call has gone And if you see what is the response, this is the response that you got. So it is in the JSON format, so by default it has chosen JSON. If it were an XML response, then it would have shown it over here, or in the raw form you can always see it. It is like this. Okay. Now, as I told you, it's a good practice to write OK over here. But if you don't return it in this way, OK, and into that employees, then also you will get exactly the same response. So I checked that response through the fiddler, and here are the results. This response came without using OK, and this response came with using OK, and both the responses are exactly the same. Of course, the date will be different because first I executed one and then I executed the other, right? But notice here that the payload is the same. Payload means whatever is given to a request or gotten as the response. Okay, that is called as a payload, or the body. So the body is the same. All the headers are the same. So there is no difference except the timestamp. Okay, so your response will not vary with OK or without OK, but it's always a good practice to return using OK or not found or bad request. I'm just making it clear to you.